Again, welcome everybody to today's session for co-requisite math faculty professional development. My name is Brandon Protus. I am at Complete College America. I want to let everyone know that we are recording this session, and that is so the folks who are not able to make it here live can still view the session. So I want to give everyone the opportunity to choose if you would like to stay with your video on. We would love to see your faces, although we will be spotlighting our speakers, or if you prefer to mute your video. Also want to let people know that we will be doing some breakout rooms today, and during our breakout rooms, we will pause the recording, and we do that intentionally so that people feel comfortable speaking candidly. So we will edit this first part out. We started the recording just so we would be able to have that for editing, and I will do an official start right now. So welcome everybody to today's session on our part of our co-requisite math faculty professional development session. This is being led by Complete College America. We are super excited today. We're going to focus on curriculum planning for just-in-time support. And in a second, I will introduce both Dan Ray and Kelly Holmetz from Carnegie Math Pathways. We'll also be featuring a panel from folks from within Nevada, Tina Martin, Hugh Doe, and Adam Kebke as well. But right now, I would like to turn it over to Crystal Abba. Crystal Abba is the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at the Nevada System of Higher Education, and she wants to extend a welcome to everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Crystal Abba, and I wanted to welcome everyone and start by thanking Complete College America for their ongoing support. I also want to thank today's presenters and the participants. For those of you who are not aware, this is our 5th math webinar supporting co-rec implementation. And as you can imagine, there's a significant amount of work that goes into putting these events together. And I could not be happier with the success of our prior webinars. And I have no doubt that today's webinar will be equally successful. It reminds me of a quote from Stephen Jobs, who once said, in essence, that if you're working on something that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed, that the vision and the work will pull you. And I think that your implementation efforts and the robust exchange of ideas that are occurring during these webinars exemplifies that. So thank you all again. One quick reminder, we do have a co-rec implementation website, and today's webinar will be posted there along with all the prior events. So if you have colleagues who are unable to attend today, please refer them to the website. So with that, I hope you all enjoys today's events, and let's get to it. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Crystal. And once I'm done speaking, I will put the website for the NSHE co-requisite site into the chat. It's hard for me to chat and talk at the same time, but we'll do that in just a second. Also, just a quick announcement for accessibility reasons. We do have captioning going at the bottom of the screen. You can choose to leave that on, or you can also choose to hide that. I'm going to take just a couple minutes to talk about Complete College America, as we are the ones who are leading this professional development session. I always like to talk about our mission and our vision. While I won't read the whole pieces of it, what's important is that Complete College America is focused on one thing, and that's increasing college completion rates and closing institutional performance gaps. While that sounds like two things, we believe that they're one because you can't achieve one without the other. We also use the word institutional performance gaps instead of equity gaps or achievement gaps, because we feel that the responsibility and the accountability for student success lies with our institutions. As you see in our vision, we know that when we make differences in our structures because of how our institutions and our systems and our policymakers work, we can make a difference with students. Complete College America has different pillars, and within those pillars, strategies that we know and data shows make a difference with student success. Those pillars are divided into purpose, momentum, structure, and support. And what you can see is that within the momentum structure, co-requisite is one of our game changer strategies. So we just want to be able to situate the amazing work that Nevada is doing in terms of the work that we know makes a difference here at Complete College America. Because this is offered remotely, we know you are in front of a computer, and so we would love for you to sign up create a profile at completecollege.org. Thank you, Renee, for dropping the co-requisite website into the chat. I will put the website for Complete College America. The reason for that is by signing up, you're going to be able to connect with leaders across the country working on co-requisite, as well as other student success strategies. You can receive our newsletters, and you will have all sorts of resources made available to you through that. We also want to remind you about the series that we're doing in terms of the math co-requisite. So while we have today's wonderful session on just-in-time support, we have a couple sessions coming up in March. We're going to focus on active learning and online instruction. In April, we're going to focus on growth mindset and assessment for the co-requisite classes. You also see the previous course professional development sessions we did. Those are available to view for either you or your colleagues on the NSHE website. So with that, I'm also going to put in the chat in a second a link to our evaluation. I'll put it in at the end as well. We do value your opinions, and so we would love your feedback. And with that, I'm going to introduce both Dan Ray and Kelly Holmetz from Carnegie Math Pathways. We're very excited for today's workshop. They've put so much into it, so I'll let you guys take it away.
Right. Thank you, Brandon. And thank you guys for inviting us here. It's very nice to be asked to come in for a situation like this where there's a lot of excellent work going on in Nevada. And although both Kelly and myself are not from the state, it's great to be able to join and share what we've learned in our work, both around co-recs and around supporting just-in-time support. As Brandon mentioned, my name is Dan Ray. I am the Director for Network Relations for Carnegie Math Pathways. Just to give a little bit of background on Carnegie Math Pathways, we are a network now of approximately 80 institutions. We began our work actually 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And our goal from the beginning was to address the developmental math challenge. And especially looking at the data 10 years ago, we saw that there was large proportions of students who were finishing high school, going on to primarily then at that point, our focus was around community colleges, testing into developmental math, either 1, 2, or sometimes 3 classes behind college level credit. And then probably not shockingly so, very few students were actually making it through that sequence of classes and attaining their college level credit. So, our goal was to work with researchers and practitioners to design 2 courses that eventually came out of this work that were much more holistic in the way that they approached both pedagogy and course curriculum. Those 2 courses are Statway and Quantway, both of which were originally designed to be an acceleration for developmental math students to get them to and through 4 credit courses more quickly. Ironically, since then, what we were at the time viewing as acceleration, for example, the Statway being a 2-term sequence to get students through a statistics credit, has been further accelerated, and one of those accelerations is co-recs. So we've, for about the past 4 years, been working on taking our courses or our sequence of courses and redesigning them to be delivered through the co-rec model. So that's sort of where we're coming from. And Kelly Holmetz, I'll ask her to introduce herself. She is one of the colleagues that we've worked with heavily, especially around our co-rec development.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Kelly Holmetz, and I am the Math Literacy Pathway Coordinator at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So we are a 4-year institution, but we had similar challenges to that a lot of other institutions are facing. We actually blew up our dev math sequence about 7 or 8 years ago now. Because we found that, as Dan had mentioned, only about 55% of our students that came in needing developmental math actually made it through the college level math course. So we needed to do something about it. And our institution decided to go with what's now known nationally as the Pathways approach, allowing students to choose either an algebra pathway or a quantitative reasoning pathway. And our success rates increased. We actually got about 75%, which was a huge increase for us from the 55% originally. But we were still losing a lot of students transitioning between semesters. Students would drop out, or they just, didn't want to do more math after they took one math class, or all kinds of reasons. And so we really thought that the co-rec model would be good for us, instead of having students try and do their math over 2 semesters or 2 terms, to have them do them at the same time. And allowing the students to come in being able to take college level math was huge for us. Our co-rec right now has an over 80% pass rate, which we think is phenomenal. From where we started. So it's worked very well for us. Again, you have to keep in mind, these are students who test at the dev math level, and they're getting, college math credit their first semester. They're doing a lot of work to get there, but in just one semester, they're getting their graduation requirement for math completed, and they're doing it at an over 80% pass rate. So that's kind of where we are in the co-rec movement.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly and I will be sort of tag teaming here at the top of this session, and then turning things over to our panelists towards the end. To get us started, though, I wanted to have you complete a short poll, 1 question. We've got a lot of different institutions represented here, and we thought it would be helpful to know where you are in the process. So I will launch our poll. There we are. All right, give you just another couple of seconds. Interesting. So I will end our poll and share the results. It would seem that we have the biggest group here piloting, in the piloting phase, which is definitely the interesting phase where you're learning as you go. And certainly our folks in the planning phase are hoping to learn from those piloting and being brave and going ahead of them. And then a few schools are actually scaling. So you've found the solution, you found the sort of the course structure that you're going to be moving with, and you're trying to bring that to more students. Excellent. Hopefully the material that we'll be sharing with you here will be beneficial to all groups in this session. So let me turn that off and share with you the agenda for the session that we've put together. It really has 3 parts. The first part is around just-in-time support, but from Carnegie Math Pathways standpoint, we wanted to sort of broaden the scope to what you're potentially thinking of as just-in-time support. So we've got a couple of different approaches that we think will do just that. And then about halfway through the session, we want to take advantage of the experience and expertise that we have in the session to have you go out into your breakout rooms and have a chance to reflect on your experiences, and then bring those back to the whole group to share out. And then probably most of the last hour of our time together will be our panelists in Q&A from Nevada. First, though, the concept of just-in-time support. Whenever this topic, came across my radar, I started thinking, okay, just-in-time support, what does that entail? And the options that came to mind were sort of around, students who were having a struggle with a particular concept, and how do we support them through that concept by either providing more foundational materials, maybe there's print materials or videos, or really giving them the curriculum support just as they're running into the problem where they need that curriculum support. But thinking about just-in-time support, I wanted to broaden things out to include two topics. The first being collaboration, because when students are collaborating and they're building those social ties, they are creating their own network of just-in-time support. So, that's something that is very active, and it's a way that they're creating their own resources. And the second part is social and emotional learning. So being in a mindset and having the skills to engage in productive struggle, which is the key learning element here, is important for them to have that sort of immediacy of being in the right sort of headspace at the right time to engage in productive learning. So we're going to sort of frame things around those two buckets, collaboration and social and emotional learning. And I'll hand things back to Kelly to get us started with collaboration.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So I think it's important that we talk about what do we mean by collaborative learning? And it's not just putting students in groups, although that certainly could be, but it's actually it's an educational approach where they're working together on a learning activity. So we really want them to have a meaningful activity where everyone is actually required to participate, so that they're all feeling like their contributions are valued as part of the group and necessary for the learning that happens. And when we do that, lots of different things can happen. So for example, it can lead to much deeper learning, and more robust as well. It supports the development of higher level thinking, as well as strong communication skills and leadership skills. A lot of times, we we hear the old saying that what employers want nowadays are students who can work together, who can come together to brainstorm and create a solution to a problem. So the collaborative learning that they do in the classroom is good practice for that. It helps to improve student self-efficacy, right? Their participation, they feel like they belong, so it helps with retention. And it provides opportunities to understand not only where their I was going to say colleagues, sorry, where their peers are coming from, but realize that diverse perspectives not only exist, but they're important, and they actually bring more to the learning that happens. I sort of mentioned that, workplace interactions are, can sort of, those skills can be prepared for in the classroom then as well. So one of the things that, especially in our, I don't want to say post-COVID, I don't think we're through it yet, but in the COVID environment, we often hear, okay, that's fine. We know there's all kinds of research that exists as far as doing groups in person in a classroom. But how do you do that online? How do you make that work where the student actually still feels like they are part of a community? And it can be more difficult online, but it still can be done. And so I did feel like, or I should say we felt like it was important to address that as well, that although we're talking about collaborative learning, we are talking about it also in the virtual space. So an example that could be done either virtually or in person is something like this flow chart that you see here. So a typical course unit, you're going to do some preparation work. The students will do some work on their own to review skills, to look at a particular situation that they will encounter in class during their collaboration session. They are going to also engage, after they do that individual work, in some sort of a socio-emotional support activity. It could be a survey, it could actually be, which we'll see a little bit later, could be a more in-depth activity where they have to read something and respond. But it's actually an important part of a course unit, is getting at the socio-emotional support. Collaboration session would happen next. That can be done again virtually or in the classroom, but this is where the learning takes place during a lesson and during the group work. Instructor feedback can be done as part of the collaboration session if it's in class, but could also be done after as sort of a summary. And then the students then would complete exercises individually, much like in a traditional math course, where they, review the topics that were discussed during the lesson, in this case, during the collaboration session, and actually extend some of those concepts that were highlighted during the lesson. So what are some key characteristics of a remote collaboration session? One of the things that the Carnegie Math Pathways has done is to create an online experience, a collaboration session, where the instructor may not be present. Could be, but doesn't have to be. And the collaboration sessions are actually included, they include things that will assist student groups if the instructor is not there. As we know, even in in-person classes, you can't be in every group at the same time. So there are built-in assistance for groups in case the instructor can't be there at that exact moment when the students are having struggles. So, for example, there are hints built into the system, things that as an instructor I may announce to the whole class, or if I were standing there with the group, would talk to the group about, to kind of nudge them a little bit or get them to think about something or highlight a particular part of a problem that they're encountering. The student groups actually use an integrated Zoom room session. So it is integrated within the system, which I really like, because the only ones who can get into those sessions then are students that are in that group. So the security is a lot tighter because of that. Having said that, the sessions are recorded, so instructors can go back and watch those sessions later to find out how the groups were functioning and to hear the discussions that the students were engaging in during their collaboration session. So what we're going to do next, as you can tell, there's something coming, is we want to give you a flavor for what this actually looks like. So we do have a video of a class. This was at Ridgewood Community College. This is in Minnesota. And this is the beginning of their second group collaboration session. And the idea here is you'll kind of get hopefully see that they've made the connections already, both personally as well as with the math. I'm not hearing anything, Dan.
Oh, you have to hit start video.
I did. No, it's an issue with my computer.
All right,
My camera wasn't working.
Hey, how's the garage sale?
Good. My mom has been here the last 2 days. Yeah, so I wouldn't have it set up if she wasn't here. So we pretty much have everything set up and ready to go, except for I have to trace and mark clothes.
Yeah, good. Yeah. All right, let's fire away. We got
All right.
35 minutes.
All right, let's start. Well, roughly it says, I think. All right, introduction, if you guys can go ahead and read that. Yeah,
Okay.
Councilman Missouri.
Ready?
Okay.
What's your piece? Okay, oh yeah.
Sorry, did I go too fast?
Oh, I was just cracking out loud, like, what is BCE and CE?
Could we say when you describe them that a million has 6 zeros and billion? I mean, I don't know.
I think we could be super obvious like that. It doesn't say that it has to be like math or anything.
Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Million comes first. Then billion, then trillion. You know, I mean, that's how I would describe it. If you think how you're going to describe it to a kid, it's like when you give
Yeah.
money to a kid, you got your 1, 10, 100, 1,000. You start with your million, billion, trillion. So it's like,
Yeah. And the more zeros, the larger the number.
yep,
Yeah.
that's great.
I would make the comment that the more zeros, the larger the number,
Yeah, yep.
or the longer the amount of time.
What was that last part?
Or longer the amount of time. I don't know if we need the last part or not, but
We can add it on there. Look good?
yeah.
Right. This solution.
What? I would not think you could say that $100 million and $100 bills would fit in a grocery bag. I don't think of that.
Oh, yeah, they didn't specify it to showing like,
That's what I said. Well,
oh no.
1 million seconds is 11 days. I'm gonna write that down.
Okay. So that was, right? I mean, that's real life student learning happening right there. And you can see, right? I don't know if you all heard at the beginning when we were getting the audio going, but they were talking about the garage sale, right? So just like students would do, right, in person and in the classroom, you know, they talk about what's going on in their lives. They've made those personal connections, but then they get right into the math. So they actually do see some value in doing this group work. One of the other things I would like to point out in the video, if you saw that, you know, there's one person who's actually typing, they're sharing screens, and one person is the leader and is in charge of typing everything in, which is why they were talking together. Okay, is this what we meant? Is this, you know, is this right? Because there's one person who's responsible for typing in the answers for the whole group. And there are solutions available in the system, not till after the group inputs the answer, but solutions are available, potential solutions are available for the problems. So always fun to see the student perspective. So what we've learned. Collaboration benefits. So, right, benefits to both the students and the instructors. Students really, with the collaboration, really have ownership of the process and understanding. Unlike when, you know, an instructor is up in front of the class and just lecturing, they're the ones that own the process. What we want is the students to make sense of the process and the understanding. students do build the strong bonds with their peers in collaborations. And they really do find the value in the group work, and they learn how to productively engage in collaboration. So, you know, the concern is always, well, what if there's just one person that's doing all the work, right? That's a concern from students and instructors, but we really don't see that very much in these collaborations. Instructors gain deeper insight into student thinking. I hear this, actually, I just heard it last week from one of my instructors, and they couldn't believe how much more they learned by watching the videos of the students and really getting a deeper insight into what the students were thinking. The videos allow you to be there for the whole session. So as an instructor, often we don't get to sit with the whole group for the whole class. You're jumping from group to group, but having the videos, and you know, it's interesting because the students sometimes forget that you're there, and they'll talk to each other about it. They'll talk about you in a good way, but you know, when she's watching this video later, you know, maybe we should mention, you know, this, that, you know. And so you really do get a deeper insight into their thinking. And you have multiple student group, what we'll call artifacts, right? That help to get at that thinking and understanding. Students are typing the answers in, as you said, but you also have the video where you hear the discussions and see the interactions that are going on. And it actually, the collaboration benefits give an opportunity to shift instructor mindsets about student capabilities. I will admit, I've also always been a fan of group work. I used it all the time in my in-person classes, and allowing the videos, you know, I was a little nervous about these types of collaborations that, you know, well, I'm not there to help them. You know, what if they get stuck? But, you know, the students figure it out. And a lot of that's built into the system as well that we use. You know, there's the hints and things, but using collaboration, students really are capable. I realized that, you know, I actually was probably providing more guidance than I needed to, that students will figure things out if you give them the space and the time to do it. So even though I was a very firm believer in group work before, I realized that I was probably leading more than I thought I was. And the group work really is the best way for students to understand the material, because they're making sense of it in a way that makes sense to them, if I can say that twice. So key learnings as you're thinking about, you know, possibly implementing this yourself, is that you really want the content to be designed to promote reasoning and discussion. That's where the students really learn to understand the material, if I can say it that way. That conceptual rather than skills-based tasks work best for this. And so what do we mean by that? We have a colleague who calls them group-worthy tasks. So it's not individual tasks that they're doing and just checking with each other, although there could be some use for that. But you really want projects or activities where they need each other in order to complete it. A lot of the questions that we do in collaborations are open-ended sorts of questions, and that is much harder to do on your own rather than having someone to bounce ideas off of. So projects, you know, could be multiple and varying tasks that that are involved, self-direction as well. So all right, Dan.
All right, thank you, Kelly.
Turn it back over to you.
Thank you, thank you. And before we leave the collaboration part here, we gave the collaboration part of the session in the framing around the context of remote instruction. And we did so intentionally, knowing that both that is the current modality for a lot of folks, but as we start to move back into face-to-face, it is definitely one of those situations where if this can be successful in remote instruction with students logging into a Zoom room in their group and working through productively, it's much easier to envision extrapolating this into face-to-face instruction. I think for folks who had been doing collaboration in face-to-face instruction, it was a bit of a cognitive leap to believe that it would work fully remote and with the instructor, if not entirely not present, at least not present for significant amounts of time. And then just to tie this back to the idea of just-in-time support, those students that you saw in the video, they were happy, they were smiling, they were joking with each other, they were talking about their garage sale, and yet, I don't know if you noticed, they were very much like, okay, now this is why we came here. Like they brought it back to the task at hand rather quickly. And just having that ability and seeing other people demonstrate those qualities and those traits gets translated into all sorts of other situations. At the top of the call, we mentioned that we were going to talk about collaboration, and we were also going to talk about social and emotional learning aspect of this. And for us, the framework that we use to talk about SEL is what we call productive persistence. So productive persistence is sort of an improvement science approach to problem solving. And for productive persistence, our aim is that we want students to continue to put forth effort throughout challenges they may face in the course, and that when they're putting forth that effort, that they're doing so using effective strategies. So that being the aim, we broke things down into these 5 primary drivers, and we have other driver diagrams that break the primary drivers down into secondary drivers, and then the secondary drivers have change ideas that sort of trickle back through the drivers with the ultimate gain plan for impacting the aim. So just I'm going to touch briefly on each one of these. The first one is around students' beliefs and that they're capable of learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've already heard references to growth mindset. That certainly is a big part of students' beliefs. The second one being socially tied to their peers, faculty, and the course. That came up within the context of collaboration, but we'll also expand on that a bit. The third one here, that students believe that the course has value. If you're going to ask students to put forth effort in a subject area, they unsurprisingly need to know that that course has value. And we'll talk about a couple of different types of value. And then the fourth one here is sort of an all-encompassing bucket of students being college ready, right? And that they have the skills to be college ready, that they have the study habits, the sort of the time management skills, and the basic know-how to succeed in college. And then the last one here, that faculty in colleges support students' mindsets and their skills. So before we dig into those more deeply, one of the things that we've done is we've taken this framework and used it to assess students with a survey at the beginning of their course during week 1. This is a 20-question survey, usually takes students about 4 minutes to complete. And the risk indicators that it's meant to surface are belonging, mindset, stereotype threat, and anxiety. And based on their responses to these 20 questions, we then put them into these sort of categories of low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. And this graph shows sort of the results of students in those different risk categories. So we can see at a baseline math assessment taken during the first week, Students who are at high risk based on these social and emotional factors, 61% score below the median average on that pre-knowledge assessment, compared to only 21% in the low risk scoring below median in the initial math assessment. If we go out to mid-year, the differences are a little bit tighter, but definitely consistent that those high-risk folks are more likely to fail the mid-course assessment. And then looking at the end of course assessment, we can see that those differences are now expanding, right? That it's now what, 5 times more likely to fail the end of course assessment if you're in the high risk group versus the low risk group. And then of course the opposite when we look at classroom success. So the likelihood of being successful is what, 3 times less than those who are low risk coming in. I can't sort of overstate the power of this, that you have an extreme amount of sort of predictive ability on asking students 20 questions at the beginning of the term, none of which are math questions, but that the elements that you are assessing have such an impact on the trajectory in the course. So jumping in first to the first topic here, and again, I know that this is a topic that's been addressed before, and a lot of folks probably on the call are familiar with Carol Dweck's work around fixed and growth mindset. But fixed mindset is just that. It's students who believe they sort of have this certain level of intelligence, and there's nothing that they can do to either to increase that. It's just sort of like one of those things you have or you don't have. Either you're a natural at math or you're not. And if you're not, the only way you're going to pass is maybe you'll get lucky. So those are our fixed mindset group. And then our growth mindset group, they believe that, it's like working out, that as you try harder, it makes you smarter. It's just like trying to run faster or trying to lift more weights, that it's just an intellectual workout. And that through putting in that hard work and using good strategies, that they can learn and they can change the way that they learn, and that their intelligence is malleable. So a lot of our work is around taking students who maybe come into the course with a fixed mindset and trying to move them in the direction of being more growth mindset oriented. And just to show one of the activities that we do, this is a growth mindset article that was created by Lisa Blackwell and David Yeager. So this is a short article meant to sort of frame the brain as something that can grow, and that whenever it's being stressed, that's what it's doing. It's a muscle, and that it's growing. And it's possible even for adults, and that you can improve. You can improve your abilities through practice and the use of good strategies. So students would read this sort of article, and then they would be asked to write a short reflection on it, and how would you convey the meaning from this article to another student. So they're asked to sort of internalize this, and then they're immediately given a rich task in which they're sort of putting it into practice. So all of our courses start off with an activity like this, which you could imagine in a math class, is a little different for students. One of the first things is reading an article, writing a summary, and I think this helps sort of set the stage that this course is going to be different. For social ties, it's probably no surprise that people may commonly question their belonging in both socially and academic settings. if we think of the students who come to our institutions, if we think of freshmen who have been at a high school, say for 4 years, they've made their social ties, they've been around the same people for a long time, they come to our schools, they're much bigger, they're much more dispersed, their contacts are no longer present, or at least not omnipresent. And even for adult learners who come back, there could be a high degree of uncertainty that they are in the place where they belong. And as a result of that, any sort of negative social event becomes much more ambiguous. You could think of a student who is in a situation like this, and maybe there's a study groups being set up, and for one reason or another, he or she was not on the text thread. It would be very easy for a student who's already questioning their belonging to assume that that is one more sign that they don't fit in. So this social belonging is huge. And one of the things that we get to do is we get to do a lot of interviews with students. And some of the quotes here resonated with us around this whole idea of feeling socially tied. The example here, I'm embarrassed to be at a community college because high school teachers said I would end up at community college because I'm lazy. You can imagine the social and emotional baggage that is brought to your institution from students who had that sort of experience in high school. The second quote, I don't have any friends here. In between classes, I sit in my car and I see everyone talking to others, and I wonder, how did everyone else make friends? Again, they're at a new context in a new location, trying to figure out a new system and around a lot of people that they don't know and don't initially have any social ties to. The last one is the one that always gets to me, though. I felt that if I stopped coming, no one would even notice. I think as an instructor, to think that someone could come to your class and feel that way is kind of heartbreaking. So to address these sort of concerns, I have a few examples here of things that we do in our courses to try to address these sort of social ties. The first being a contract activity, where on either the first or second day of class, this would be an activity that you would do with your whole class, where you would sort of lay out, these are the agreements, you know, we're gonna be here for each other, we're gonna show up, we're going to, you know, come to bat for our peers, we're gonna put forth the effort. But there's been a lot of variations on this where the instructors have included their commitments to the students, that what they're going to do to support the other students. And this becomes an artifact that at some point comes out later on, maybe after the first test, and you say, just remind you, you know, we all said that we were here for each other, and that's still the case. The other two activities that you see described here, the faculty email noticing routine, is around absences, so that if a student does not show up, they get an email. One of the really insightful things that we found from this activity is that it depends what sort of outreach is being delivered. So you might imagine a student misses class and you contact them, hey, notice that you weren't in class today. Keep in mind, you get a test coming up on Friday, and you know your homework from Thursday is due as well. You know, that's a very transactional email for a student to receive. Another variation that we've had faculty try is just emailing and saying, hey, I noticed you weren't in class today. I hope everything's okay. Hope to see you in class on Thursday. That's it. That's the email outreach. And interestingly enough, the responses from those sort of open-ended, showing concern emails got many more responses back to the instructor, noting that, trying to explain, this is what happened, I'll be there Thursday. It was much more appreciated because it wasn't a transaction. It was just showing concern. The student group noticing routine for building social ties as well is all about having students in their group make contact with each other around, students being absent or students, having any sort of needs, thinking of just-in-time supports. So the way this would often play out in class is that whenever students come in, let's say you got your groups of 4 and you look around and one of the groups of 4, there's only 3 students there. And you might say to the group, has anyone heard from Jim? And one of the students would almost inevitably say, yeah, I texted him or he texted me, his bus is running late, he'll be here in like 10 minutes. So that not only is the instructor noticing, but your peers are noticing. And then believing that the course has value. I know no one on this call has ever heard anyone say this, especially around math. When am I ever going to use this? And I know I've tried to be as creative as possible in responses to this, but we really have to treat this as a legitimate question and concern from students. If we're asking them to put forth effort and they say this, then there's an issue there to be had. And to address that, I think it's helpful to frame this around 2 different viewpoints. The first being like self-oriented and the second self-transcendent. So self-oriented is maybe this is the program that I'm going to be going into. I'm doing veterinary sciences, and this is the way that I'm going to need to, this is the math that I'm going to need to know how to do dosages. I think the same thing for nurses. I'm going to need this proportionality, and I have that direct contact to my field. There's also issues with like personal finance, right? Where I can say, this is something that's going to apply to me. This is how credit cards work whenever they're doing compound interest, that sort of thing. But then there are also these transcendent issues. So if we think of, environmental concerns, if we think of issues around social justice and issues of equity, if we, if we think about those sort of, world, like world health, you're thinking about the pandemic, all of those show interest, garner interest well beyond just the immediate self. Lastly, our skills, habits, and know-how. One of the first things that shocked me whenever I started teaching mathematics, which at that point was in middle school, I was teaching middle school math early on, was this idea that there is such a thing as math anxiety. And math anxiety? I mean, I know what math is, I know what anxiety is. I had never really placed them together because I had never experienced them together. And I was surprised that it is apparently just a math thing. Nobody has history anxiety or, biology anxiety. But knowing that it exists and that your students suffer with this sort of anxiety that is exacerbated by the content in your course, we implemented a stress reappraisal activity. So before the first test, students are given, a couple of pages, a handout here, and it talks through like what's going on whenever you feel anxiety, and it's sort of reframing it less as your body sort of shutting down, but more of your body gearing up for for a fight, right? It's getting ready. Everything's going to be happening more quickly, and that's what your body is preparing it for, so that they don't think of it as a negative thing, and it makes it much more manageable. And then for just general skills, habits, and know-how, we know that students oftentimes spend a lot of time preparing for courses using ineffective strategies. We know that students sometimes procrastinate on their assignments, and we tend to sometimes think of that as being laziness. And research has definitely shown that procrastination is around confidence, not about laziness. If students are procrastinating on doing that math homework, they may go outside, I live in Florida, and mow the lawn with a push mower to avoid that math homework. They're not being lazy. They're showing that they don't have the confidence. And that's where the avoidance comes in. And of course, shallow learning strategies. They're studying, but they're not doing, what would become effective. The 4 stages here of self-regulated learning, the 4 cycle. I think a good example of that is like flashcards. If you're doing fact-based, the information gathering would be the first part, right? So you're figuring out what information you need to know, and you're assembling them on flashcards. The next cycle for self-regulated learning would be setting a goal and planning it. So I'm going to work on these 2 times a day for the next 2 days before the test on Friday. And then enacting, that's where you're going through and quizzing yourself with those facts. And then the adaptation, where the things that you're hitting it perfectly every time, you're taking those out because you don't need to spend time on things you already know. And then just to visit the last driver again. So the last driver is sort of all-encompassing. It's saying faculty and campuses and institutions, that's part of the role, is that they do what they can to support these students' growth mindsets and students' skills. One last thing before I turn this over to our breakout rooms. I had mentioned that we've been doing co-recs for a few years now from Carnegie Math Pathways. I wanted to share with you some of our learnings. And again, depending on where you are in the process, this may or may not be much of a surprise, but there is definitely a tendency for students to be less diligent about their co-requisite course than their home or base course. So I think that's because it can have this otherness about it, so that they have the course, and then whenever they're done with the course, if they want to, they can sort of spend time over there. Is it very loud for me right now? No? Okay. I'm going to keep going then. So this, of course, is an issue that, how do you address that? And the faculty that I've talked to, their suggestions have been, making it as closely tied to the other course as possible. And we've talked about things like having it in a single course shell in your Blackboard or your Canvas, so that it's not in a different place, and being really thorough about the way that you're connecting grades from one part to the other part, and that the sort of communication around everything that's due is very robust and very frequent, because these students are not keeping up with 2 assignments due this week. They're keeping up with 5, and they think these 2 are important and these other 3 aren't so much. So communication becomes critical. And at registration, students just knowing what this course is. If they're brand new to college and they're signing up and they're taking a co-requisite course, who's explaining what that means? And are they explaining it appropriately? We've heard horror stories of advisors giving the impression that the co-requisite portion isn't very important, which you can imagine exacerbates everything in the previous bullet. And then lastly, for the co-rec components themselves, I know there's a lot of models out there that use ALEX or use some sort of self-paced independent study. From our faculty, they've always said that they think that that would be much more successful if those could have a synchronous component as well, so that you're helping add emphasis to that part of the course and giving them much more grounding around when they're doing it. All right, so that is the end of our presentation. What we want to do now is we want to give everyone an opportunity to go into some breakout rooms. We'll set those up in relatively small groups so that you can have some conversation for approximately 10 minutes, maybe 8 to 10 minutes. And our prompts are going to be to consider your experiences either as a learner or as an instructor, where you've dealt with the tools and structures that support collaboration. And maybe those have been a struggle where there's been some pitfalls, or maybe you've seen some sort of promising practices, but to share out your experiences around supporting collaboration with the rest of your group.
Great, thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I'm curious to hear anything that came to light during the breakout, both from your personal experiences as a learner or as an instructor around this issue of collaboration. So if you could, please use the chat to type in there any positives, any pros, good experiences, anything that you've experienced that you would not like to experience again. Suggestions, answers. Excellent. Yeah, Rebecca, she uses Breakout Rooms online, and it helps keep her students accountable for attending and participating in class. Yeah, there's something about knowing that there's 3 or 4 other people that you're supposed to be working with whenever you get into class that makes you feel much more obliged to go to class, especially if you're working closely with those people, whereas the instructor may come around occasionally. Those peers are with you for an extended period of time. Other reflections? A couple there. Tammy, my students have said that the breakout rooms are fun. That was something that I think really came across in the video earlier. It really did seem like they were enjoying themselves. I mean, granted, a lot of people have been socially distancing, and the fact that you get to actually engage with someone on a recurring basis has weight to it, and it's something to look forward to, certainly. Because it's easier to make people feel part of a class in person, but in line as well feels good. Yeah, there's definitely more of an ease of having someone physically in front of you to sort of be more welcoming. You know, there's something about being in the same room together, but it is nice to know that to a certain degree that can be replicated online. And excuse me, and Gail, you had done similar activities on group. All right, so feel free to continue to use the chat. You know, if anything else comes to mind from the breakout session, we would love to have you share that in there. And especially if it's something that we should bring up with our panelists as we continue with the session. So I want to bring things back to our faculty panelists for the remainder of this webinar. And so Kelly introduced herself at the top of the call, but now we're joining with 3 panelists from Nevada. So I will hand things over for them to give an introduction to themselves and to what's going on at their institutions. Adam, can you get us started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Kepke. I'm the Math 95 coordinator and also a lecturer at UNLV. Just a quick rundown of the environment there at UNLV with our math co-recs. In 2017, I started working with the math department very closely on redesigning Math 120. It just wasn't really serving the needs of the students that were represented in the college. So we redesigned 120, and then as a result, we looked back at the prerequisite course. It was about the same time that we split from the traditional prerequisite model where we had 95 and 96 leading into the 100 level courses. Instead, we split the pathways, you know, and we have a quant reasoning, which is the Math 95, and then of course we have the algebra path, which is Math 96. So after redesigning 120, we went backwards and redesigned 95 to just include the prerequisite material needed for students to do 120. So when the policy came in that we wanted to go all co-rec and get rid of the preparatory courses, 95 120 was a natural fit. It had already kind of just recently been redesigned, and so it was the one that I took on myself just to kind of put together and build the 5-credit course, which includes the 95 prep material and then the 120 quant reasoning material as well. We're still in pilot phase. We officially roll it out in fall, but we've had about 2 years now pilot, so we're pretty good as far as what we want to do. We're only making small changes at this point. We're pretty much ready for full-scale implementation now, so we're far along in the path. We've learned a lot about keeping students in line in terms of collaborative learning, in terms of making sure the contact hours are efficient enough to stay on task and to give them enough time for that just-in-time remediation. So in our institution, it's been going really well. I'm obviously really excited to share with you guys some of the things that we've been doing and some of those best practices and get some of those back from you guys as well.
I think that's me.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I want to say a special hello to all my peeps from TMCC. I see quite a few of you here. I'm glad to see you here. I am a math professor at TMCC. I'm also the department chair. That's new this year. So the process of co-rec has been, I guess, in the last 2 years at TMCC, we plan or replan, very similar to what Adam said about Math 120 and 20, and we roll that out this year. And so we are currently not offering anything below 96. So we plan it, we run it, and we are in the process of adjusting and scaling a little bit. On the other hand, Math 126 and 26 is still in the preparation phase that will roll out for the first time in the next fall. So we're kind of all over the place. But TMCC will have 2, I guess, simpler paths for our students. The liberal arts students will go with 120 and 20, and the STEM students will go with 126 and 26. And I know that there are discussions about what about health allied students or business students, and we'll be receptive of what to come from the system, I'm guessing. And I'm also involved in both the curriculum redesign with both groups, as well as with other departments at my college, advising IT, marketing, and IR to make sure that things will work as a department chair. It's a lot of work, as you all see. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Hugh. Tina? Oh, you're muted, Tina.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
You are.
Okay, good. There's a joke in my house that I am not as technology savvy as other things that I might do. So anyways, thanks. Anyways, so I'm Tina Martin. I'm from CSN. Unlike some other colleagues throughout the state, I think our transition to co-requisites has been a little slower. We have a fairly large department. There's 47 full-time members. And so bringing together that large a group of people hasn't been as easy or as maneuverable maybe. But we have been doing a lot of learning and growing. Although we haven't run any full official pilots, we have been offering a limited number of our co-rec courses. They have had prereq placement levels, but starting in fall, it will become all open enrollment for those courses. This year, we have 3 very devoted co-requisite committees that have subcommittees, one for each course, 120E, 124E, and 126E. And we've been planning and researching, digging into the curriculum, selecting textbooks, working right now on creating our course shells, and then preparing for training and professional development that's going to be happening in May and June, July, and August. So we have a lot, as Hugh said, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. We have a lot on our plate, especially because we're a little behind the curve. This fall, if you look in our schedule, we have set 43 sections of 120E to be starting, 18 of 124E, and 22 sections of 126E. All of them will be open enrollment. So we do have some challenges ahead of us, but I think our groups are really excited. I will tell you, I was one of those people 2 years ago, which was fighting against this whole co-rec policy. I was in tears because I'm worried about our developmental students and where they're going to go. And so we have a lot. We have a lot of stuff that we've changed and done in the past 2 years. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the change and a little nervous, but here we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. As sort of a continuation from the first half of the call, I thought I would let us at least touch on collaboration in the beginning here. So with all the changes that have been going on and the sort of structural changes around implementing these co-recs, it's been my understanding that there's also been an opportunity to rethink the way these courses are being taught, right? And to introduce new pedagogical routines and have more of a holistic change outside of just introducing the co-recs. So with that, how has collaboration in particular been a part of your institution's move to co-requisite courses, if it has? And if so, what benefits or challenges have you experienced? And I'll put that out there to the group.
I can start. I can feel that in the beginning. Collaboration in the 120-20 pathway for UNLV has been a critical part. In the redevelopment of 120 originally 4 years ago, it became really evident that it was something that was lacking in the course in previous tries of it. So I feel like it was a really good opportunity for us to just start from scratch and say, okay, if we want students to collaboratively learn, what do we want them to be, what kind of discourse do we want to have going on in the classroom? And so we set up a kind of a hybrid type structure where there was some students had to take the initiative to do some reading prior to coming into class. And what that did is it really freed up time in the classroom to have that discourse, to engage in some of that. So I definitely think that that's one of the big strategies, is to try to take some of that contact time and dedicate it to that. And of course, doing that means that you have to sacrifice in the classroom, right? So some of the onus needs to be on the students to do some of that learning at home on their own, in their own time. And that way, when they meet, then it's kind of like a reinforcement of ideas first, instead of just kind of lecturing from scratch. And then once you've reinforced those ideas, then breaking them up into groups and having them, have some discussion about the material is really important. The liberal arts track, in my opinion, the quant reasoning track, you have students that may not be, as driven to straight calculation, but these students also have an unusual strong ability to articulate ideas. Liberal arts students usually, have very good language skills, are very good at kind of articulating that. So one of the main goals was trying to get students to articulate those thoughts just kind of in a math setting. And of course, they're usually not as comfortable doing that, but once they get out of their shell and they realize that all the other students in there are just like them, they have some apprehension to math, but once they get it, they really get excited about it. Then the discourse becomes something vital to the course. So.
I think it's important for our faculty to be together, to be on the same page. So we had a small committee develop 2020 courses for us, but then we continue that collaboration after it's been rolled out this last fall and this spring to make changes, to adjust. We understand that it won't be perfect the first time it happens, so it needs to be improved as we see any areas that could be improved. I also want to add that at TMCC, we have also a community of practice for our part-time faculty who are teaching for us. I think supporting our part-time is also very important. A lot of our courses are taught by part-time, and we want to include them into the discussion and the adjustment of these courses as we roll out. And so the community of practice, I think we meet at the very start every week, just to make sure that we can debrief and quickly adjust anything that's needed, and then after that once a month, and that continued through this semester. And I think when we run 126 and 26 for the first time next fall, we will continue to do so.
I like the way, Hugh, you framed the community of practice around collaboration. It's interesting that that's almost like an easier sell, because people, in faculty are used to collaborating with each other, but it's just a matter of taking that and extrapolating it into, these are skills that we want our students to have. And if they're going to have that in their professional lives, then putting it in their academic lives makes a lot of sense as well. But yeah, you're modeling it for them.
And so the question was, how has collaboration been a part of your institution's move to co-requisites, and what benefits and challenges have you experienced? Well, I will say at CSN that there has been a tremendous amount of collaboration in our department. It started with our chair. We had Patrick Villa, and now we have Aluk Pandey, and they have led the charge and made it a focus of what they think is important and where to go forward. We started out with a large co-requisite committee, and then from that formed subcommittees. And I would say at least half of our department right now is actively engaged in doing the co-requisite work. I think some of the benefits, so as far as collaboration goes, some of the benefits are right now that between COVID and co-requisites, we have been forced to go outside of our comfort zones, like doing things we've never done before. And so when you have that kind of collaboration in your department, and I feel it, I'm working with all these dynamic and intelligent colleagues that are talking, and I'm getting all these ideas, it's just invigorating. So I think some of the benefits is that we're going through this together. And the other thing is, not only are we forming alliances within our department, we've been reaching out to each other. I got to know Hugh and Adam, and then the people at NSC and their Seth and all these names. So we're branching out across the state and forming bigger alliances. And I think that's, and Kelly over in Wisconsin, and I forget the name in California. So we've got these alliances going across the country, and it's really exciting and invigorating because we're all going through the change at the same time, and we're learning from each other. So it's been a growing experience. I think the greatest challenge right now is that change is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. Some of us have been teaching community college math for 30 years, and so it's hard. And so I think that's the greatest challenge. And bringing together then the whole institution, like you alluded to. You've got advisors, you've got registration piece, you've got all of the pieces that have to come together. So I think those are the two greatest challenges.
If I could just follow up on that challenges, I absolutely would agree with that. Pulling together all the different aspects of the higher ed community that are involved in making sure the co-rec runs the way it's supposed to. There are details that me as just a math teacher are not going to necessarily think about. So you always want to pull people in that have that big thinking. One of the issues that we're discussing now is, calling these co-requisites all college level credits, but then, and she right now is adding, the 20 plus 120. So you have issues with those credits not, being covered under Millennium, not counting towards graduation. So you have issues that, even the instructors who are building the curriculum can get all the curriculum stuff down, but you need to be pulling in from the university other perspectives, because there are other barriers that you may not necessarily consider when you're first building the course, and you want to get it right before implementation. So some of the pilot stuff, even though you may think, oh, okay, I feel like the content is right, I feel like assessment is right, I feel like student collaboration is right, you still want to make sure that you're pulling in from all different perspectives to make sure that it's, that everything's getting accounted for.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Tina, I think it was you who mentioned COVID in your response, and it had me thinking about, we work with several K through 12 partners, and we've been thinking lately about what's going on there this year and how that's going to impact colleges and universities once those students matriculate and come through your doors. And of course, topics such as learning loss comes up, so that students may not have quite the same skills that they had previously. And in particular, around this whole idea of co-recs, the placement for those students is going to be probably a bit more students needing these sort of opportunities. But I think the additional sort of onus comes with their SEL, their state of mind. So if you could think of students who have been going through the sort of chaotic senior year this year, their chance of coming out of that with a really firm growth mindset, outlook on things, and having a large feeling of self-agency over the process, I think that's going to be challenging. And so our sort of conversation earlier around supporting students in their SEL, and for that becoming really a part of and entrenched in these courses that you're developing, is really going to become even more vital because of the incoming students and their experiences over the past year to 2 years. So with that, as you're, again, thinking through your own institutions and the courses you're developing, how has SEL been incorporated in the course? Are there SEL strategies that have been introduced? Are there ones that are being considered? I know growth mindset is definitely one that we've heard in a lot of these webinars, but are there other structures that are either being considered, piloted? What are your thoughts on additional SEL support for this incoming group of students?
Well, I think it could be thought of in two different ways. You mentioned before, you know, how COVID has drastically changed the landscape for the way that we teach these courses. So I actually think of SELs kind of in the remote setting and then SELs in the face-to-face setting a little differently. But in the remote setting in the last year or so, we really wanted to approach SELs in a different way because you don't have that contact time with the student. You know, when you see them face to face and you get to know them and their personality and how things are going in the course, it's much easier to keep track of how those students are doing. In the remote setting, it's very easy to just kind of lose track of students who are going through the motions and are just a name in your book. So one of the things that I actually grabbed from one of my colleagues who's actually in this call right now, Megan Romero, was the math autobiography, which has been an absolute gem, in my opinion, in the beginning of the semester. It's a brief interview where we ask students about their past experiences in math, their attitudes going into the course, you know, take a picture of the place where you study. I want to see what your studying space looks like, you know, just things like that. That gives you a connection to the students that you would kind of get in that face-to-face setting that you're missing in the remote. And so I think that was one of the SELs that just kind of lets students feel like, okay, this teacher is actually a person on the other end and not just somebody on a screen, right? They actually care about where I've been and where I'm going. And of course, it makes you more invested in the student as well, because when you hear from students and you can gravitate towards their experiences immediately, then when you see those students reaching out to you via email or whatever it is, now you have some way as a teacher of relating, oh, I remember this is the student that is, you know, doing this for the third time and doesn't want to do it a fourth time, or this is the student who decided they're going to change their major and are doing this. You know, you pick up on those little ideas that you gravitate towards, and then it allows you also as the instructor a little bit more you know, familiarity with who your students are, and your students feel like they belong, like, you know, they belong in there. So in terms of the COVID, I would say in the remote setting, that's kind of the main thing that we're looking at in SEL, is just making students feel like they belong in the very beginning so that they stay committed to the course. In the face-to-face setting, we certainly do that as well. We do some icebreakers in the beginning, kind of get them to interview. We put them in groups very early. Some of those groups are predetermined. Some of them, we allow them to kind of have some decision in that. But the idea is that they should be with people that they don't necessarily know coming into the class. And over time, those relationships, they end up fostering a really good discourse. And we implement an end of a semester, what we call mini project, which is basically just a wrap up at the end of the semester, the important concepts. And in the face-to-face setting, we have students working in those in a collaborative setting. And it's really interesting to go and just listen to the conversation that's going on. It allows you to kind of manage students in an easier way. And like I said before, getting students to articulate ideas for that group is really, really important. And so putting them in those groups and kind of giving them more open-ended questions seems to be the way to get them to engage more than just root calculation.
Originally, we had a plan to have an actual physical space that we'll call a co-rec center. Our math and English department are actually in the same building, and that was a plan so that we can have advisor there, we can have tutors there specifically for co-rec, and that was before COVID. So the plan has changed since then with changes in enrollment and funding. I think that might not happen anymore, but there were thoughts of that. And I think moving forward, we will probably use some sort of that with our tutoring center, the Learning Commons. We have that, and maybe we can pivot the original plan into that direction, make it happen somehow. But there were a lot of thoughts put into that before everything that we're in right now. Another way that we can support our student is that we have a main Canvas shell for each of these courses, so that all of the instructor who teach them have access to them. And within those master shells, we have additional projects that instructor can use to address student emotional learning, like affective domains, the growth mindset that you talked about. So there are questionnaire surveys or small projects that instructors can implement during their class.
And so I think this is my favorite question. How do you get the social and emotional learning strategies? And I first want to thank both you and Adam. Both of them have shared the stuff that they're doing at their institutions. And I think when we share amongst ourselves, we get more ideas. So that whole idea of being connected and included, not only amongst ourselves, but now also in the classroom, has been the get-go from the start. We want to get, just like Adam said, you want to start forming groups, you want to start talking. And so at the very beginning of class, if you can introduce yourself with a video, write an introduction letter to your students so they know who you are, and then have them do a post back or a letter back to you so that you start to feel right away that instant connection. I think we're starting to embed tutors. That's one of our goals, is to embed tutors in our classes. So have that trained peer tutor put a video up right away, or get to know the students from day one so that the students feel another connection, especially with a peer. There's another philosophy that Anne Marie, one of our administrative assistants, had in our math department wall, and it was the math philosophy. Math means mistakes allow thinking to happen, M-A-T-H. And so I post that at the very beginning. I tell students that mistakes allow thinking to happen, and we keep that philosophy throughout the entire class. I think that helps build their ability to say, okay, if we make a mistake, it's for good. We're going to learn from that mistake. Discussion board posts have been a phenomenal thing. I had never, ever taken advantage of the discussion board till this year. And I have learned so much from my colleagues on discussion boards. Math is a language. And so I think part of our job is to not only teach the students how to write it, but how to read it and how to speak it. And so discussion boards become really important. You have content. Tammy Barker, she's on the call, she's on the thing today, the call too. She introduced this really cool discussion post right at the beginning. It's called the 4x4 discussion post, where you have 4 4s and you use operations to come up with 4 different numbers between 0 and 10 using 4 4s and just basic operations. And it's just an activity for students to just start thinking and going outside their comfort zone a little bit in a broader sense, but it's a simple way to get it. Also in discussion boards, you can incorporate the growth mindset. I have tons of videos. Again, Tammy sent this to me, but U Cubed, if you haven't seen U Cubed, Google U Cubed. They are the coolest group out of Stanford, and they have all these little videos that you can incorporate in your discussion posts. Having the students introduce themselves to each other. Oh, and mental cognition, hang on a second. So like you have a little forum post and it starts this week, and then you give them prompts and they have to say, I learned, or one thing I understand well enough to explain to somebody else, or I am still unsure about this, or a mistake that moved me forward in my learning process is this. I mean, you start them thinking about their process, and you should see the things they start writing. And then people will respond and they say, I feel the same way, or I had this, and then you get that connection going. The other way is if you have web remote, so hang on, I have a couple more things, sorry. But if you have a web remote session, invite participation, do polls, open up whiteboards, have students explain things. You get a student up there and they start explaining it to the other students, and then they come back and they say, wow, that was really empowering. And the other students are cheering them on because they know how scary it is to explain to each other. And whether it's in a whiteboard in a remote setting or in a classroom, they start getting those connections and seeing it's okay to be brave, you know? Hang on, have another thing, projects. Okay, this is the other thing I learned about, is projects. Okay, am I talking too much? But these are so cool because projects, what they let the students do is they let them get creative. So I had this, so we did this project where you have a dream home and you get to design your dream home. And one of my students is like, yeah, but my husband, I'm letting my husband pick out the flooring, you know, and I'm going to make sure it stays within this budget, but he gets to pick the flooring out. So they start to incorporate their family members into their projects, which is really cool, you know. And then the other thing is, I got this from Jen Gorman. I don't think she's on the call, but she suggested, you know, there are some ways that you can ask questions that make the students feel more in touch with what they're learning. And so part of a final project that I started last semester, and I'm going to do it again, is how has your mathematical confidence and or imagination been enhanced as a result of taking this class? Provide at least 3 unique examples and explanations supporting each example. So I asked this question of them, and I told them they could either give me a video back so they could do the video thing in Canvas, or they could write an essay. I had students just go phenomenally creative with these videos about how has their mathematical confidence and imagination has been enhanced. I had one student who wrote this poem, and I would read the poem, but I mean the opportunities for them to start thinking and becoming engaged in math beyond just the math itself has been really inspiring. So anyways, sorry, this was my favorite question. I talked a lot, but anyways, so.
It is quite all right, Tina. Hugh?
Well, yes, I want to agree with Tina on projects. You know, at the very beginning, Adam and Tina really say you want to connect to the students. You want to show the students who you are, you know, as a person, and not just this person that's supposed to say truths and they just take it, right? So projects are a great way for me and the faculty to express our interest that are connected to the math concepts. So I have several projects that I ask students to do. You know, Tina, having your dream house is one of the projects. You know, I ask students to go shop for houses and then build their mortgage table based on that. And most students love doing that, but they didn't. From that, they also realized that shopping for houses is one thing, but they also have to shop for the banks. And their lenders, right? And then they don't think of that. So that's one example. Another example is that I in my time, I like to look at this website that has all of the airplanes in the air. So you can see them all. You can see all the airports. You can see all the arrivals and departures, and it's a good source of data management. You know, find your means, find your median, and all of that. So I tell them that I'm excited about airplanes, and that's me, and then I connect that to our statistic portion of the course, and I think they appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Hugh. My next question seems ill-conceived given the enthusiasm and the openness that my panelists have expressed thus far in our panel session. The question is, how might instructor mindsets need to shift in order to increase student success in the co-rec courses? I appreciate that you guys all seem very open-minded and excited about these changes. I have to believe that you may have some colleagues who might be less enthusiastic and more prone to needing some convincing. So I'll leave that question out there.
I will most certainly start fielding that question. We're pretty far into pilot and getting close to implementation, so I might be able to speak on this a little better just because we've had we're farther down the road a little. So definitely you run into the issue when you are teaching quant reasoning, particularly when you want to integrate creative, educational approaches in a quant reasoning course. You run into the issue that new instructors or instructors who are used to teaching STEM track courses are just really not familiar with grading and interpreting the grades that may come out of a quant reasoning course. I can give you a couple examples. One, our exams are built into 2 answer types. We have short answer types, which are very similar to a traditional math exam, and then we have like a more long descriptive type questions. Does it make sense that I can run 30 feet per second as an example, right? I need a student to articulate that and then give me some mathematical reasoning why they feel that way. Grading that is much more different. It's not as objective as grading a STEM exam. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that new instructors will have to a course like that is building and interpreting a rubric and building assignments that they can take some of the subjectivity and some of the objectivity and integrate the two of them to assign the right grade. Your rating, one of my big projects has students analyzing logical fallacies that they can find on the internet or on the news or things like that. That's a great amount of reading and digesting what they're telling you. It's not just, is this answer right? Is this a 5 out of 10? Is this a 7 out of 10, right? So I think personally that is where the biggest challenge is going to come in terms of our professional development, is making sure that we have rubrics that new instructors can get and understand and not feel like they're on an island trying to grade this in a subjective way. That's going to be one of the big challenges for us, I feel like. And I know there are others, but I think that's the one that stands out to me the most.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, I was resistant. Like Tina said, she was resistant to the idea 2 years ago. I think at this point, the train has left the station, sort of way, right? We have an opportunity to steer that train, to take charge of that train. So it's scary. It's scary for change, but we have that opportunity to make that change happen. So I would encourage everyone to be open-minded, to not afraid to try new things. We have your first rollout, forgive me, will probably not be perfect, and they will need change and they will need adjustment. And we are here for our students, right? We're in this job for our students, and at the end of the day, I think that's the most important aspect of our job for us.
So I want to echo what Hugh said, that change is difficult and it's scary, and we are doing things we've never done before. CoREX is not just getting rid of developmental, it is a whole change of mindset. It's a whole change, and so it's uncomfortable, and I think the greatest strength will be doing it together and building off each other and forming those community of practices. I also think that we have to remember that mistakes are opportunities for growth, both in ourselves and our students. And we have to be very aware of the shame factor. I think that is so much more powerful than we've ever thought about as mathematicians before. But I think that's going to be something that if we can keep it in the back of our minds, I think that barrier in itself, that social and shame part of it, is something that I'm really trying hard to incorporate into my teaching. So those are some mindsets that I think we might want to focus on. Yeah.
And we're running short on time, but I'm going to jump in for a second and just say we're talking a lot about change, how change is hard for us as instructors. But as somebody who's been doing CoREX for many years now, I can also say change is going to be hard for your students. They're not used to this. They don't want to do this. Math is already hard for them. And even though, the traditional math format hasn't worked well for them in the past, they're going to be resistant to the change. So, just not that they're not going to benefit from it, because they will, but they could. I shouldn't say they will. Many students will embrace it because they know that the other mode hasn't worked for them. But the idea of taking this much more math, right? It can be scary if you're doing the group work, that, what do you mean I'm going to be in a group in math? I don't know what I'm doing. How is that person going to help me, right? So just letting them know that, no, actually you do know a lot more than you think you do about math, and what you know might be filling in a hole for the other person in your group. So it's just, the idea that yes, change is hard, but we all come out better in the end. Our students will too. So don't be discouraged. I just wanted to be sure that, you know, if you do, as Hugh said, it may not come out perfect the first time. Your students might rebel a little bit at first, but stick with it because, you know, I mean, we went, as I said earlier, from a 55% pass rate through our college, you know, and we're over 80%. So, I mean, it works.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on one thing that Kelly said around like students' responses to this. So it's interesting, we survey both our faculty and our students throughout the sort of arc of the course. And we asked instructors before the first day of their new course that's highly based on collaboration, to what degree do they feel comfortable facilitating collaboration? And they will show a high degree of comfort. But then we asked that question about 4 weeks in, and their degree of comfort is almost always lower than it was before they actually started doing it. But it's also interesting because we asked students similar questions, right? We asked them at the beginning what their, you know, concerns are about, you know, participating in collaboration, and they have most of their concerns at the beginning, and then 4 weeks in they've gotten a chance to get used to it and they see how it's working, and now their comfort is actually higher at 4 weeks in. So instructors and students seem to come at this on different trajectories with their comfort, but it's nice to know that it will level off. And I think instructors want, you know, there's a sense of control that's being lost, and it takes you a little while to recognize that and sort of grapple with it. But for students, it's just something new, and that when it's new, it's unknown and it's somewhat scary. But then once you've been in it for a while, it's like, oh, okay, this is what this is. All right, we are right at the end of our time. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for contributing your time and efforts and experiences in this endeavor, and turn things over to Brandon.
Thank you. And I want to thank Dan, and I want to thank Kelly, Adam, Tina, and Hugh. This was really a great session all around, very inspiring. I love seeing the passion here, and I hope that inspires everyone in Nevada. I did drop into the chat both a survey link. We do want your feedback on what you thought about this session. If you can take a few minutes to do that now while you're in front of the computer, that would be very helpful. I also dropped a link into the chat for the NSHE website where you'll be able to find the recordings of other sessions. Finally, I also dropped a Word document that shows the other sessions, both the ones that have already passed as well as the ones in the future. So please sign up for ones coming forward. But if there's ones that you missed, or if you had colleagues, you can check out the titles and be able to look at them on the NSHE website. So again, thank you everyone for sharing. This was really a wonderful session.